So now we have the 7 modes. There are 3 more scales that are very commonly used in jazz music and popular music. And all 3 of them are used on dominant 7 type harmonies. So let's take a look at each one of these. The first one we're going to discuss is called the Lydian Flat 7. It's a Lydian scale, but instead of having the natural 7, it has a flat 7. Right? That's the Lydian Flat 7 scale. Then we have a scale called the altered scale. Now, you've all seen chord symbols that, for instance, say C7 flat 9. Well, that ninth has been altered, been made a half step lower in order to make it sound more dissonant and have a richer color. There are several notes in the scale that can be altered to make them more dissonant. And there is a scale which uses all of them in one scale. And that's how it gets the name, the altered scale. So think of it this way. I'm going to walk you through each note of the scale. There's the root, then there's the flat 9, the sharp 9, the 3, the sharp 11, the flat 13, the flat 7, and the C. So the 4 altered notes, flat 9, sharp 9, sharp 11, flat 13, are in that scale, along with the basic chord outline 1, 3, and 7th. It's a very common scale in jazz harmony for Dom 7 chords, so you'll use them a lot. That's the altered scale. Now I'm going to come back to it in a minute and tell you one little oddity about the altered scale that you need to keep in mind. But the third of these additional scales, and the last of the 10, is the symmetrical diminished. As you might expect, it sounds like the diminished chord. And in fact, it's made up, you could say, of two diminished scales combined, 2 diminished chords combined. It's a close cousin of the altered scale. It's almost the same. It starts out the same. The root, the flat 9, the sharp 9, the 3rd, the sharp 11. But instead of the lowered 6, that flat 13, we have the 5 and 6. So the bottom of the diminished scale, the symmetrical diminished scale, is the same as the altered, but the top notes are slightly different. So those are the 3, and all 3 of these scales are used on dominant 7 type harmonies. Now, as I said, there's one more thing to point out about the altered scale. It has a secret note. That's what I call it. As it turns out, the 5th of the chord is perfectly usable during an altered chord harmony and an altered scale. It's not included because we have a complete sounding scale without the 5th. So if we added it, it would just be an extra chromatic note in there. And so it was left out in terms of describing the official altered scale. But the reason you need to know about the 5th being possibly included is that you'll run into altered harmonies in songs, and there'll be the 5th in the melody, obviously called for by the composer. It sounds good and it works. So keep in mind, when in an altered harmony situation, that even though it isn't officially in the scale, it is also a perfectly usable note on an altered scale.